Hello, gang. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I have 4 true stories sent in by viewers that seem to indicate that they may have just met their guardian angel. These stories are indeed strange but compelling, and some would say even heartwarming. But be warned, the last one gets a little creepy. In addition to an angel, the submitter may have encountered something, well, something dangerous and something unexplained out in those woods. So stick around. You don't want to miss it. Now grab your gear and let's ride. Number 1. Hey biker, this occurred about 6 years ago, and I wanted to share my experience. You see, I work for a large tech company, and they let us off early one day. I was happy to have some extra time to run some errands before going home for the holiday. I stopped by the gas station that I often frequent, which is by the bar that I used to work at and also often frequent. And then I grabbed some smokes with my gas. As I pulled out and approached the 4-way stop, I suddenly noticed a homeless man who is pushing his full shopping cart up the road perpendicular to me. He is slowing down, in the middle of the road, mind you, struggling to keep his stuff in the cart. On top of the cart is a black acoustic guitar. This person eventually appears to give up and just sits down right there in the middle of the road, legs crossed and shoulders slumped over like he's given up. Keep in mind now, he's still very much in the middle of the road and impeding traffic. You see, I live in a city. At this point, cars are starting to back up at most of the stop signs, and I throw my hazards on and get out of the car. As I'm approaching this person from behind, I call out, "Hey man, are you okay?" I get no reply. I get closer and I place my hand on his shoulder and say, "Hey, let me help you up." This person gets to his feet and, my God, he must have been over 6 feet tall, at least 6'6", just super tall. And when he turned around, I saw the biggest, bluest eyes I've ever seen in my life. "Are you okay?" I asked him again, and this time he replied, "I've just been looking for her out here. I work across the street." I blink a few times and say, "No worries, we'll find her. Let's get you out of the road." And then start pushing his cart when I notice that the black guitar is really nice. Like, I'm a musician and knew it was a nice guitar. Strange it would be in such pristine condition with this guy, and I'm ashamed to say that I thought maybe it was stolen. So there we were, standing on the corner, and he notices my lit cigarette. He asks me for one, and I give him one. Then he says that he needs to make a phone call. I ask him for the numbers and say I'm happy to call someone for him. He gives me the number, I dial it, but it doesn't work. The number was not connected. I ask him if he's got another number, and he says, "Oh, there she is." And he grabs his cart of stuff, thanking me for my help. I say no problem and get back in my car. My back was turned for maybe 5 seconds while I got in my car and situated, and the guy was just gone. He was going in a very specific direction, and he was suddenly nowhere in sight. One woman was unloading a car in the direction he was heading, so I pulled up to her and asked if she had seen anyone matching his description. Cart, guitar, blue eyes. She said she hadn't never seen anyone like that. Shrugging the whole thing off, I pull up to the next stoplight and look over to my left, and I realize where it is he said that he worked. It was a church. Now, I'm not really religious, but I don't have an explanation for this. He was nowhere in sight. No place he could have ducked into. He was just gone. I don't have any other theory, just that maybe angels do walk among us from time to time. Maybe I passed a test. I just don't know. Signed, Mason. Number 2. A quick narrator's note here. The original measurement units in the story were metric. I converted them all to standard since my audience is 95% American. Now, on with the story. Dear Tattooed Biker, this was a few years ago. I was in the car with my mom on the way home from visiting a friend. It was winter in southern Canada, so there was a ton of snow and driving was hard. The car ends up getting stuck in the deep snow. For those who don't know, it's extremely difficult to get a car out of the snow because the wheels will lose grip and just keep spinning. Often, you need to get a tow truck, tie chains on the wheels, put wooden planks down, or have at least 3 strong guys push the car out. As my mom and I were figuring out what to do, we had nothing to get the car unstuck. And that's when I noticed a girl standing about 10 feet away. She must have been just crossing the road and noticed us. The thing is, I didn't see her walk up to us. She looked to be in her early 20s, maybe 5.5 feet tall. Hard to tell in her winter clothes, but probably weighed no more than 125 pounds. She just looked like a normal person, with dark, shoulder-length hair. She was wearing black winter clothes, had on a toque, and a backpack as well. She signaled that she was going to try pushing the car from behind. We just nod, and my mom tries driving, but no luck. My mom says to me, "Get out and help her push the car." As I go to unbuckle my seatbelt, the car lurched forward as if there was no snow at all. As I said before, it just doesn't get unstuck that easy. As we drove, we both turned to wave and thank the girl, but she was gone. There was nowhere she could have gone in such a short amount of time. She had simply vanished. And to be honest, there's no way she could have pushed the vehicle out by herself at her size. We've never seen her since, and I'll always wonder who or what she was. Thanks for reading. Signed, Samantha. Number 3. Hello, Biker. Okay, here we go. I've had a few unexplained experiences, but this one was really different. It was the summer of 2017, and I was in a really bad time in my life and had recently broken up with my girlfriend. Another girlfriend had just passed on a few years before that. I was horribly depressed, even at a gathering of friends at the night spot where we gathered on Thursdays. So I sat out on the front sidewalk and had a comatose posturing deal going on, just crying and crying for like 30 minutes straight. Friends came and went to check up and stuff, but a totally weird thing happened after about 45 minutes of going over the past few years in my head and just how horrible everything was. Out of nowhere, a lady touched me on my shoulder and said, "Can I help you? Is there anything I can do for you?" My first thought was that, please, don't be another Christian who wants to pray for me, but I responded, to help me not mess up my life. I was bitter and angry. And then things got really weird. We kept talking, and she's like, "So I got this feeling passing by the West Oaks Mall," and she said I had a random urge to drive up right here into this parking lot and walk right up to you. Weird, right? But then she starts talking about life and how she broke her rib and how she's learned so much about life through the injury. Then this lady says that she was divinely gifted and the Creator was talking through her. I just don't quite understand why I continued to talk to her, but I just felt compelled to listen. So eventually she says, "Your name is Adam, right?" Just like total eyebrow look over the shoulder moment. I'm like, yeah? And I look around to see if my friends had put her up to all this, but they were still inside. She continues, saying, "You are going to change this world. You are going to use your gifts and talents to bring true joy, progress, and change to this world." I kind of marvel at this statement, and she assures me again that it's not her speaking, but the Creator speaking through her. She mentioned a few other personal events in my life that I can't quite recall, but they were very, very personal things that she could have never known. I begged her for a human name, and she finally gave me one. She said that her name was Natalie. My heart and soul were broken open like a walnut by this experience, and I never saw her again. She did offer to buy me dinner, but I felt like I was in the presence of an angel or a higher force and couldn't lie, so I insisted on revealing that I had just eaten before we met. It was indeed a spiritual experience. I'm grateful for this angel rescuing me during a moment of absolute despair. Not long after my encounter with her, I met a wonderful girl who was quite in tune with the paranormal and unexplained. I truly believe that she was sent to me after my encounter. I will admit that after talking to her, that I went home, lay in bed, and asked that I would meet a wonderful woman who I could learn to trust and love. And it seems that my wishes were answered. Signed, Adam. Number 4. Hey TB, I had this encounter a few years ago, but I started thinking about it quite a bit recently. I also wanted to add that while I don't fully dismiss the paranormal, I don't really believe in ghosts and cryptids and such. This encounter didn't really change my mind about that. I had decided to go on a solo hiking trip for about 2 weeks. This would have been my second time doing something like this. The first 2 days of the hike were, well, very average and relaxing. Just a simple hike, but at night things got a little bit weird. I went to sleep at around 2100 or 2200, and nothing much happened until around 2 a.m. I remember smelling a faint stench of rotting meat. It wasn't anything too crazy, but it was weird enough to somewhat wake me up. I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but then I started to notice that something was moving around my tent. I did think that because of the smell and the sounds that it might be some carnivorous animal that maybe stank of rotting meat for whatever reason. But since I was still half asleep, I wanted to make sure it wasn't a bear or something, so I opened my eyes to check around. Now, just a note that during the night the moon was quite bright, so it was possible to see quite well outside. So when I opened my eyes, I could see a vague, lanky humanoid shadow outside my tent. I didn't feel like I was in danger or anything. I did have a sidearm with me, so even if it was some creep, I didn't really feel threatened while holding my gun. After about a minute, the guy left and the smell also disappeared. But since it was a very creepy encounter, I stayed awake for about an hour. And after nothing else happened, I eventually went back to bed. The next day, I had that weird feeling of being watched by something dangerous. I don't know if it was because I was confident in my ability to protect myself or whatever, but I just didn't feel like I was in any real danger at all. I just felt really creeped out. I didn't really enjoy that day all that much, to be honest, and because of that, I set up camp a lot faster than I usually did. I didn't go to bed at my normal time since I didn't want someone sneaking up on me again. At around 1 a.m., I could smell that weird smell again. So I gripped my gun a little bit tighter and tried to find the guy. But instead, all I saw were just a pair of yellowish eyes in the distance. I stared at them for about 5 minutes and then they just vanished together with the smell. I didn't feel like I was being watched anymore during that night, so after an hour, I did decide to go to sleep. The next day, that feeling of being watched was back, but again, I didn't feel as though I was in any danger at all. I decided that even though I felt that way, I would still rather cut this trip short instead of actually getting into a situation where I am in danger. So I started making my way back through a more roundabout path, and nothing really happened that night. The next day, I suddenly could smell that rotten stench. It wasn't any stronger than before, but since I was in a decently large clearing at the time and didn't see anyone or anything around me, I did panic a little bit and started walking with a faster pace. I'm not exactly sure how long I walked after that, but around midday the stench got stronger. Now I think that it's important to note that I don't have the best vision and I should probably wear glasses, but I don't most of the time. So when I looked around me and saw a gray, humanoid figure quite far away to my left, I did panic. But by the time I put my glasses on, it was gone. After that, I didn't really feel like staying there for much longer, so I started doing a slow run to try and get out of there faster. I had run quite a distance while feeling something following me, but then I ran into this strangely peaceful clearing where both the stench and that feeling of being watched stopped. It was a relatively small clearing with a few small boulders around, but the strange thing was a man who was in his late 40s, or maybe even early 50s, sitting on one of the boulders. He was wearing very plain dad clothes. Definitely not something you'd be wearing while hiking out in the middle of nowhere. Plus, he had no hiking gear or camping gear anywhere near him. But the thing that I noticed first about this guy was his strangely bright green eyes. They weren't bright in the usual sense, but more kind of like backlit, if that makes any sense. After running for so long, I was exhausted, and the man noticed that and told me to just sit down on one of the boulders and rest. I didn't even think about it and just sat down. We sat there and we talked for a while, mostly about hiking and nature, and while talking, he had this very friendly smile that really put me at ease. When I had rested, he offered to help me build my campsite there in the clearing. He was extremely good at starting a fire. We shared a cup of tea, and he told me that it was very nice talking to me, but that he has to go now. He didn't really say why or where he has to go, but he just stood up and he left. That night, I didn't hear any other noises other than a few birds and crickets. When I woke up the next day, I felt extremely refreshed. I casually packed up and continued along the trail. And this time, I didn't feel like I was being watched, or I didn't smell that stench at all during the rest of my hike. This was the first time that I've told this story in full detail. I usually say that some animal or whatever was following me, since that way people might actually believe me, but I decided to actually write down exactly what happened. Thanks for taking the time to read this. Signed, Vince. And there it is. All I have for tonight. So, what did you think about these experiences? I'd love to hear your thoughts and theories down in the comments below. And if you've ever had a brush with the unexplained and want to share your story, just send it to the address in the description and it might just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker.